He's as precious as apple pie. Those were the words my mother-in-law Nancy used when she saw my newborn son. She showered him with such adoration. It was clear she truly loved him. She willingly took care of him when I was at work. But at the time, I didn't notice it. The love she lavished on my son was a bit too much. My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old and working full-time. I married my husband Liam a year ago, and soon after we started living with his parents. Before moving in, I was a little anxious, but my relationship with my mother-in-law was, I believe, reasonably good. She even helped us with household chores, since my husband and I are both busy with work. But if there was one thing that bothered me, it was the daily questions about our plans to have a child. It's been a year since you got married. Aren't you planning to have children yet? I think it's about time you started. You're not getting any younger. Don't you think you should be more mindful of that? Day in, day out, the topic of having kids would come up. Perhaps my mother-in-law meant no harm, but for me, it was becoming a source of stress. It's not like I didn't want kids. But I was also working, and we had financial considerations to think about. My mother-in-law says it's been a year, but from my perspective, we had just been married for a year. I wanted to continue working, and if we were to have children, I wanted a bit more financial security. So having kids right after getting married was not in my plans. I knew my mother-in-law was looking forward to a grandchild from the start of our marriage. But her constant demands, disregarding our situation, were becoming a problem. Feeling worn out from the constant pressure, one night after my mother-in-law went to bed, I decided to discuss it lightly with my husband. She keeps bringing up the topic of kids. What do you think? The daily remarks are putting a lot of pressure on me. I was honest with him about how stressful it was to be constantly asked about grandchildren, without any consideration of our situation.
Well, Mom was really looking forward to a grandchild, but I didn't realize she was pressing you this much. I'm sorry.
My husband seemed surprised. He hadn't thought his mother would be so persistent. He promised to talk to her about it. Then my husband made a suggestion.
Not because Mom is pushing us, but shouldn't we start thinking about having a kid? You know, I've got a promotion coming up, and it looks like my salary will increase,
Liam revealed.
So we'll have a bit more room in our budget, and I think it might be less risky to have a child while you're still young, Emily.
He wasn't forcing the issue, but he wanted to add this to the mix. He hoped I would consider it. Well, if your salary is going to increase, that might be a good idea. Okay, I'll think about it. But for now, please talk to Nancy about easing up. I requested some time to consider, and emphasized to Liam that while I was open to having a child, I needed his mom to stop pressuring us. A few days later, Liam did talk to his mom, and thankfully, her constant prodding stopped. After that, the topic of kids never came up in direct conversations, and before I knew it, I was feeling less stressed. Once things settled down, I found myself more open to the idea of having a child. Just like Liam suggested. About that baby, I think we should move forward with what we talked about. Considering our age and health, sooner might be better, I told him. So we decided to wait for his promotion to be confirmed, and then we would start trying for a baby. Half a year later, everything fell into place, and I found out I was pregnant. We were happy, but nobody was more thrilled than Nancy. She had been waiting for this moment to become a grandmother. Every day, she was restless with anticipation, always checking up on me, which was quite endearing. Although I didn't appreciate her rushing us, I knew it was because she wanted a grandchild so badly. Gradually, I found myself able to interact with her in a more relaxed manner. A few months later, The day of my delivery arrived. Despite my many fears and worries, with the support of my husband and Nancy, I successfully gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him Jackson. The joy I felt holding our little son was immeasurable. After the delivery, I went on parental leave and dedicated my time to taking care of our newborn. As a first-time mom, I was groping my way through child rearing, and it was a lot harder than I had anticipated. Nevertheless, the joy of having Jackson far outweighed the hardships, and I cherished every moment I spent with him. Time flew by quickly, and before I knew it, Jackson was nearly a year old, and my parental leave was about to end. I decided to return to work as planned, but then we hit a snag. We couldn't find a childcare center. I knew there was a shortage, but I didn't expect it to be this difficult. Liam and I were left scratching our heads. Eventually, I decided to extend my parental leave. During that time, Jackson kept growing, and by the time he was almost 2, I decided to return to work. We still couldn't find a childcare center, but Nancy offered to take care of Jackson. "You don't want to quit your job, do you, Emily? I'm always home anyway, so please don't hesitate to leave him with me," she said. "I'll just be bored if I'm alone." Her offer was a godsend. With our son turning 2, my husband and I had been planning to enroll him in preschool when he hit 3. There seemed to be enough openings at nearby kindergarten, and we thought we could somehow manage for another year. For the past 2 years, we'd been sharing childcare responsibilities with my mother-in-law. She was someone we felt we could trust to care for our son. Thanks to her, I was able to make a successful return to work. So I started working again. Everything was going smoothly at work, and our life was complaint-free. A year after we started this lifestyle, as our son was about to turn 3, I noticed something odd about him. He used to be thrilled when I came home, but now he seemed distant. He was always around my mother-in-law, not wanting to get close to me. I thought maybe he'd become too attached to my mother-in-law because she was looking after him. But I was also doing my best to communicate with him. I wondered what could have possibly happened. Then, something even more worrying occurred. Our son had stopped speaking almost entirely. As he grew older, he became quite the chatterbox, to the point where it was almost too much. Now, it was as if he was a completely different person, not speaking at all. Could it be because I've been working and he's feeling lonely? Or is there something wrong with him? My husband had also noticed that something was off about our son. We decided to take him to the hospital, but my mother-in-law vehemently opposed this. "A hospital? Why? Jackson is fine. He's a really good boy. I'm the one looking after him, so trust me, don't label this child as sick." She was absolutely frantic in her opposition. This made me suspicious. A woman as overprotective as her should be rushing to the hospital if she thought something was wrong with our son. Yet she was actively opposing us taking him? I had always trusted her with our son, but this made me distrustful. My husband also felt there was something off about my mother-in-law and brought it up one night after she'd gone to bed.
"Do you really think there's nothing wrong with Jackson? Mom was so adamant that he's fine."
"I think we should get him checked out." I agreed with my husband. Our once talkative son had become entirely subdued. No matter how much my mother-in-law assured us he was fine, we couldn't just let it be. We decided on the spot to take him to the hospital immediately. A few days later, my husband took time off work to match my schedule, and we took our son to the hospital. My mother-in-law seemed unhappy about this until the end. "I told you he's fine. This is a wild goose chase." She was still angry as we left the house. She initially wanted to come along, but my husband told her it was best if just the two of us took him, which might have upset her. Ignoring my mother-in-law's irritation, we headed to the hospital with our son. Our son was our main concern, not my mother-in-law. Throughout our journey to the hospital, our son remained silent. My husband and I attempted to lighten the mood, to break his silence, but it was in vain. Could something be wrong with him? We exchanged worried glances. Upon arrival at the hospital, our son went through a series of tests. My husband and I stood by anxiously, awaiting the doctor's diagnosis. We were prepared to accept any result calmly, but the doctor's diagnosis was something we hadn't expected. Despite the multitude of tests, the doctor stated that there was no physical abnormality in our son. A sense of relief washed over us, but it left us puzzled. Why had our son changed so drastically? To our queries, the doctor suggested,
"It might be something psychological."
What could he mean by psychological? On our way home from the hospital, my husband and I discussed various possibilities. Still, we arrived home without any clear answers. As soon as we entered the house, my mother-in-law, as if lying in wait, asked us about the test results. When we told her that there were no physical issues, she responded with a triumphant, "See, I told you so." We deliberately kept quiet about the psychological aspect, knowing that she would likely create a fuss over it. From then on, my husband and I paid more attention to our son than ever before. I made a point of coming home from work as early as possible to spend more time with him. My husband did the same, trying to converse with our son more, even sharing a bath with him, ensuring he established solid communication. Gradually, changes started to appear in our son. He still didn't talk much, but he began to approach me with a smile, just like before. My husband and I reflected on our behavior, thinking that we might have made him feel lonely. I even started contemplating quitting my job. Then one day, after finishing work, I came home to find our son waiting to greet me. Such an occurrence had become rare, and it filled me with joy. As I patted his head and told him to wait in the living room while I changed, my mother-in-law emerged from the living room. Just as I was heading towards the bedroom to change, she stopped me, saying that she had something to discuss about our son. "Recently, Jackson has been showing a defiant attitude towards me. Did you say anything to him?" She asked calmly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes, which struck a sense of fear in me. Defiant? I don't see it that way, and I haven't said anything. Upon hearing my response, my mother-in-law glared at me and began to yell. "Lately, he has been ignoring what I say. It's absurd for him to rebel against me when I'm the one taking care of him. He's being strange, rebelling against me who has been treating him so well." My mother-in-law, who had insisted that nothing was wrong with our son when we tried to take him to the hospital, she is now calling him abnormal. Her words intensified my mistrust towards her. Until now, I had left my son in her care, reassured by her apparent affection for him. But I began to question if that was a mistake. However, I saw no strange behavior from her while we were at home together. But the unsettling feeling I had about my mother-in-law just wouldn't go away. I decided to find out the truth for myself. After having a chat with her, I pulled out an old voice recorder I had used for work and secretly set it up in the living room the following morning. I didn't feel great about spying on my family, and I thought my husband might oppose if I told him about this, so I kept it a secret. Obviously, since the goal was to monitor my mother-in-law, I didn't let her in on the plan either. The next day, after I got home from work, I retrieved the recorder from the living room and played back the recording in our bedroom. What I heard was outrageous. It was my mother-in-law saying the unthinkable. My hand was shaking from shock, and I felt a surge of anger. I was mad at my mother-in-law and at myself for not noticing this before. I collected myself, then contacted my husband. I asked him to come home as soon as he could. I was thinking about leaving the house with our son. I apologized for recording without permission. I attached a message and sent him the audio file I had retrieved from the recorder. Then I quickly returned to the living room, picked up my son, and took him to the bedroom. My mother-in-law looked slightly annoyed, but she didn't say anything. As I put my son to sleep in the bedroom, I waited for my husband to come home. Watching my son's peaceful sleeping face, I heard my husband returning home. Then, I heard him yelling from the living room.
"Hey, Mom, what's the meaning of this?"
He must have rushed back home. My husband was panting. I hurried to the living room as quietly as possible so as not to wake my son. "What do you mean? What's going on?" There was my mother-in-law, stunned by my husband's uncharacteristic rage. I tried to calm my husband down. "Jackson is sleeping." At my words, my husband seemed to come back to his senses. He took a deep breath and motioned for my mother-in-law to sit in front of us. Wait, what? What's happening?" I placed the recorder in front of my clueless mother-in-law. Then I explained why my husband and I were upset. "I'm sorry, but we recorded you while you were alone with Jackson. Can you explain this to us?" I said, and played the stored audio. The numerous words that my mother-in-law had presumably spoken to my son filled the room. It was painful to hear them again. But my husband and I silently endured it and let her listen. "When will you understand I am your mom? You should call me Mom, okay? That woman is not your mom, so don't get along with her even when she comes back. You've been clinging to that woman lately, and you've even welcomed her home yesterday, but you don't have to do that." To my shock, my mother-in-law was demanding our son to call her Mama. Even when I, his actual mother, returned home, she insisted that he shouldn't get close to me. I was stunned into silence when I first heard about it. It also made sense why our son had been acting odd.
"That woman she's referring to is Emily, right? What on earth does she mean by teaching him Emily isn't his mother?"
My husband calmly yet angrily confronted his mother. Rehearing the recording, I realized how unsettling it was. "No, you got it all wrong. This is just a game. I'm just trying to make things fun for him." A pathetic excuse spilled from my mother-in-law's mouth. What kind of game was this supposed to be? To think she would act normal around us but fill our son's head with such nonsense behind our backs. You claimed that our son was abnormal. But isn't the abnormal one here you? All our son did was not act according to her whims, and that's why she labeled him as abnormal. There's nothing strange about a child wanting to be with his mother. But my mother-in-law couldn't stand it.
"A game, huh? Do you really think such an excuse would work? Explain yourself."
My normally mild-mannered husband, for the first time, interrogated his mother with a stern look. Caught in a bad position, my mother-in-law fell silent. No matter what we said, she kept her head down without responding. Finally, my husband, losing his patience, slammed the table and declared,
"We cannot allow someone who does such bizarre things to be near our precious son. We're leaving this house."
Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law, who had been looking down, quickly raised her head. "Huh? Leave? What do you mean? What are you saying? I absolutely hate this idea. It's going to be troublesome. I apologize. Please forgive me." She must have realized what it meant for us to leave. The previously silent mother-in-law suddenly began to apologize. If we left, not only would she lose her grandson she longed for, her life would also become difficult. We had been taking care of most of her living expenses. I felt deep contempt for her when she raised her voice the moment she realized her future living conditions were in jeopardy. Do you think a mere apology can solve this? Do you know how our 3-year-old son felt? Thinking about our son, I couldn't hold back my tears. My husband seemed to feel the same. His eyes red. He threw an even colder gaze at his mother.
We're leaving, whether you're troubled or not. As far as we're concerned, you're no longer family.
With that, he grabbed my hand and headed for our room. We began to pack, picked up our sleeping son, and left the house. The moment we left, my husband apologized to me for his mother's behavior, but I couldn't bring myself to blame her alone. We are also responsible for not noticing it earlier and leaving him with her. Hearing that, my husband murmured in agreement. But severing ties with my mother-in-law was a decision my husband and I made. It was undeniable that our current situation was having a negative impact on our son. That's why we, as parents, must improve it. As we discussed this, we hailed a cab and headed for my parents. I had contacted them before confronting my mother-in-law, so both my dad and mom warmly welcomed us. There, my husband apologized to our son about his grandmother and patiently listened to his side of the story. However, as expected, our son didn't say a word.
He might be hurt deep down. Let's give him some time until he's ready to talk.
We decided to prioritize keeping him as calm as possible for now, while also considering counseling for him.
Jackson, I'm sorry. From now on, it's just going to be the 3 of us. Mom, Dad, and you. You don't have to worry about anything anymore.
My husband gently patted our son's head as he said this. Then, in a feeble voice, our son said, "I don't like Grandma." "Jackson, can you talk?" Surprised, I raised my voice. Both my husband and I, holding back tears, waited for our son to say more. Once we told him he would no longer be living with his grandmother, he slowly began to share everything. The fear of her rage if he didn't treat her as his mother, which made him unable to say a word. Being told that I was a wicked demon and that he should stay away from me. And the confusion he felt because he loved both me and his father and didn't know what to do. In his own halting words, he spoke slowly. I deeply regretted ever trusting my mother-in-law and focusing solely on my work. My husband and I continued to apologize to our son, telling him that from now on, it would be just us 3 always together. We tried our hardest to convey to him how much both of us loved him. Since then, until we found our next home, we lived at my parents' house. Thanks to my mother-in-law's absence, our son started regaining his cheerful self, even speaking with me normally again. Every day, I am sincerely glad to see his smile back. My husband gets daily messages from his mother, begging him to come back home, but he never responds. I used a blocking feature to avoid getting any messages from her. Just the other day, my husband went alone to his parents' house to retrieve our belongings. He apparently completely ignored his mother even then. He told me she was crying loudly, like a child.
Even seeing my mother in that state, I felt no sympathy. The only family I need to protect now is Emily and Jackson. I can't tolerate anyone hurting them, even if it's their own grandparents.
That's what he said while talking about his mother. I'm deeply grateful to my husband for taking immediate action to protect our son. I truly feel that being able to live with my precious family is the greatest happiness. I do feel a little sorry for my mother-in-law, who lost that. Eventually, my husband cut off all contact with his mother, and we moved to a new home. We've arranged to hear from a relative if anything happens to his mother. According to this relative, she's completely deflated, and she seems to be getting more and more depressed every day. She doesn't seem to have much room in her life, and apparently she spends her days crying alone in her large house without ever going out. On the other hand, we moved to a secure condominium and started our new life. I quit my job to spend more time with my son, and together with my husband, we're doing our best to take care of his mental health. Thanks to that, our son seems to be back to his energetic self. Sometimes he can be a handful, but even that I find endearing. I want to continue watching over my husband and son, to ensure that our son never has to go through anything tough again, because that is our greatest happiness.
You're good enough for dog food. Come on, say bow. I never thought I'd be subjected to such humiliation. Although our marriage is still fresh, I've tried to comply with this woman's demands in my own way, but it seems all for naught. She might be an alien or something. That explains everything. I don't know the language aliens speak, but I no longer wish to talk to her. My name is Allison. I'm a 32-year-old office worker. Perhaps influenced by my game-loving older brother, I've been fond of games since childhood, especially role-playing games that immerse me in unreal worlds. I've made many friends through social media, which I started a few years ago. One of them is my husband, Carmine. We both liked the same game and shared favorite characters and spells. When a new game came out, we'd go buy it together. After years of such companionship, we became conscious of each other and decided to get married. Carmine's parents are Stanley, who is often away on solo assignments, and Bianca, a housewife. Stanley, due to his busy work, comes home only a few times a year. Carmine's grandmother, Stanley's mother, also lives with them but has been suffering from Alzheimer's for a few years now, and recently, her hearing has declined, making conversation difficult.
Grandma got forgetful all of a sudden when Dad went on his solo assignments. It must have been quite a shock,
he said. Bianca takes care of the grandmother-in-law. Since Carmine lived alone early on, his parents-in-law's home is just Bianca and the grandmother-in-law. I wondered if I would have to take care of a stranger who wasn't even my parents someday. However, both parents-in-law are healthy, and it seems that the opportunity is still far off. I was completely at ease. Until that one phone call. One day, it was my day off, and after finishing all the housework I had accumulated, I was playing my favorite game. Then, an unfamiliar sound rang out in my room. What's that sound again? Oh, a ringtone. I rarely get calls, so I forgot my own ringtone. Seeing the displayed name, I tensed up a bit. A call from Bianca? It was the first time I got a call from my mother-in-law, Bianca, and though nervous, I thought something might have happened, so I hurriedly answered. Hello? You're late. It's common sense for a working adult to answer promptly when a superior calls. The sudden sarcasm made me instinctively want to hang up, but I refrained. Sorry, I'll be careful. So what can I do for you today? As if. You're free on your days off, right? Playing with that incomprehensible toy? Do some work. Fulfill your duties as Carmine's wife. Told to visit the parents-in-law's home on my next day off, Bianca hung up. After the call, I was in a daze for a while. Why must I be subjected to sarcasm from a call I rarely get? I thought about ignoring it, but she is Carmine's mother, after all. Maybe I'll just listen to what she has to say. I decided to think that way. Of course, I reported to Carmine that night. I'm really sorry. It's probably going to be a hassle, so you don't have to go. It was honestly comforting to hear Carmine say that. Still, it's infuriating. At times like this, there's a place I always go to after work. Hello? Oh, if it isn't Allison, something bothering you? Susan from the pottery school greets me with a smile and those words. I start with a light heart, but now I'm completely engrossed. Susan is about the same age as my grandma, but is still strong and willing to listen to my life problems. She's like a mom to everyone. Of course, pottery is fun, but I come here to talk to Susan. Listen to this, Susan. I got a rare call from Bianca, and it was a parade of sarcasm. You must be free, she said, or do your duty as a wife. I didn't expect to be told such outdated things. Susan always listens to my complaints without a frown. Just ignore that pointless Bianca. There's still such old-fashioned people around. People who say such things are often lenient with themselves. My son's wife is just like that. I may not be blessed with Bianca, but I'm surrounded by kind people. It naturally makes me want to try harder. On my next day off, I did as Bianca told me and headed to the parents-in-law's home. When I parked and headed to the entrance, Bianca was already standing on the porch. Oh, scary. I struggled to stay calm and greeted her. Good morning. The norm is to act 30 minutes earlier. Don't keep your superiors waiting. She said that, and though I had just arrived, I already wanted to leave. I can understand this for work, but why must I be scolded for her inexplicable convenience? And a 30-minute early visit can be inconvenient for the other party, which I don't want to do. No, but it's still 10 minutes early. As I tried to answer, I was shouted at. Don't talk back. Am I in the military or something? I looked up, resigned. I will never open my heart to this person again, no matter what happens. And I will never take care of her in her old age. Even if offered a large sum of money, I refuse. Really, you're late for the appointment. Well, I'm off now. Bianca said this and was about to leave, so I stopped her. Wait a minute, you call me here without explanation, and I don't understand. Well, I'm going out until tonight, so you will have to come here on your days off from now on and do the housework. And take care of the person holed up in the back room, too. After saying this, Bianca left in her car. I've never met someone so hard to communicate with. She seemed kind when I met her with Stanley and Carmine, but that wasn't the case at all. I thought about going back without doing anything to avoid being scolded again. But more than that, I hadn't met my grandmother-in-law yet. Bianca had told grandmother-in-law, but since she didn't understand, she decided on her own that I didn't need to attend the family wedding. By the way, we only had a simple meal and didn't have a wedding ceremony. Later, Carmine and I were supposed to greet her together, but our days off didn't match, and embarrassingly, we never made it. Excuse me. As I opened the entrance door, a shocking scene unfolded. Too dirty. It wasn't quite a garbage house, but it seemed to be a matter of time before it became one. The room was overflowing with things, and a mountain of laundry, washed or not, spread across the floor, and the kitchen sink was full of dishes. Dust had accumulated in the corners of the room, and it was visibly appalling. The last time I came, the room was clean and tidy. What on earth happened? This is too terrible. As I was thinking this, I heard noises from the back room. Ah, grandmother-in-law. Thinking I should greet grandmother-in-law, I went to the room. Excuse me. Oh, since the day Bianca called me, I've been going to the parents-in-law's home as told. I've come to understand that Bianca probably spends every day out and returns home late at night. She doesn't seem to take care of the house or grandmother-in-law at all, and while she arrogantly tells me to do my wife's duties, it's clear that Bianca isn't fulfilling any herself. Maybe she got carried away because I obediently listened. I'm relieved that Carmine, who always plays with toys, finally brought home a wife, but after all, a wife is a stranger. I guess you're a free housekeeper. I was loudly told that once. In this day and age, harassing a son's wife is just unacceptable. Of course, I reported all of Bianca's actions to Carmine, who kept apologizing every time he heard about them. You don't have to go to that house anymore. That's what Carmine told me. He even said he would complain to Bianca himself, but I told him to wait because I had a plan. I continued to visit the parents-in-law's home because I was worried about grandmother-in-law. When Carmine saw that grandmother-in-law and I got along well, he was very pleased. After a few months of those days, while I was cleaning the parents-in-law's home as usual, Bianca said, There's a memorial service at the end of this month, and people will gather, but make sure you don't say anything unnecessary, okay? I smiled and replied, Of course, Bianca. Bianca seemed not to be completely satisfied with my obedient self. The memorial service was for Carmine's grandfather, the grandfather-in-law's death anniversary. He had already passed away by the time I married Carmine, but he was said to be a gentle and kind person. He got along very well with grandmother-in-law, and they used to travel together. Carmine told me they always held hands when they were out. Grandfather-in-law died of cancer, and grandmother-in-law took devoted care of him. But the parents-in-law did not help at all. It's just unbelievable. There's a lot of preparation to do, so make sure you come early, okay? And I think you know what I mean. Bianca said that, and I cheerfully responded, yes, I'll act 30 minutes early. Yet she scolded me. Your voice is too loud, be quiet. I thought about throwing the TV remote at her, but managed to hold back. You can talk like that now, but just wait, get ready. I looked forward to the day of the memorial service. The long-awaited day of the memorial service. I was told to come 30 minutes early, but I went an hour early. Sure enough, it seemed to be an inconvenience, and Bianca, showing her true colors, came out of the entrance angry, saying, You're too early. There's such a thing as too much. Honestly, when I saw her face, I thought she was a monster. I quickly cleaned the room and prepared the tables when I heard a cheerful male voice say, Good morning. Heading to the entrance, I saw the staff from a famous local steakhouse standing there. I had been there once with Carmine, and the meat was tender and quite delicious. However, it's not kind to the wallet, so it's not a place I can often go to. As if saying I was fine, Bianca pushed me aside and began talking to the handsome staff in a slightly high voice. Good morning. Nice weather today, isn't it? Ooh-foo-foo. I saw someone say ooh-foo-foo for the first time and went back to preparing. Hey, hurry up and carry the food that arrived early. I heard Bianca's annoying voice. While thinking, yes, I headed to the kitchen. There I noticed something. Bianca, there's one meal short. Is this a mistake? Shall I call? When I said that, Bianca, with a mean smile, said this. It's not a mistake. I never prepared a portion for you. I was stunned, never expecting to be treated like this. After all, today people are gathering, and you, my son's wife, won't have time to eat. How shameless. Feeling like I had been called a greedy person, I finally felt indignant. Maybe because I didn't talk back, she felt good and said, A housekeeper like you is good enough for dog food. Come on, say bow. Then she put the dog food left over from the dog they used to have in the parents-in-law's home in front of me. At that humiliating act, I couldn't help but laugh. I would never understand this woman, not in a lifetime. Because she must be an alien or something. I have no intention of talking to someone with whom I can't communicate. Thinking that, I shouted at Bianca in a language I didn't know, pretending to speak alien. And for a moment, Bianca's face showed a hint of fear at my sudden behavior. What? Are you out of your mind? Are you mocking me? Yes, I guess so. I've been putting up with it for quite some time now. I don't like living in a house with someone as nasty as you. I don't know what you're upset about, but will you be satisfied if we get a divorce? I won't allow a divorce. Then I'd have to hire another housekeeper. That would be a waste of money. With that, Bianca came at me, trying to grab me. Stop it! How disgraceful! Turning around, there stood Carmine and my father-in-law Stanley, along with Stanley's brother and his wife, who lived far away. Bianca hadn't noticed them because of our argument, but it was already time for Carmine and the others to arrive. I don't know how long they had been watching, but Bianca became completely subdued, perhaps because Stanley intervened or from the shock. Then it was time for the priest to come to the house. The memorial service ended modestly, and it was time to eat. The grandmother-in-law stayed in her room, saying she wasn't feeling well. I haven't eaten this in a while, but the steak here is really good. While Stanley said that, I was bustling around bringing drinks and such. Allison, come eat too. You don't need to do all this. Thank you. Come over here. My aunt-in-law Cindy also called out kindly. Thank you, but it seems there is no steak for me. I pretended to be dejected as I said that, and when Cindy asked, why? I replied, I can't possibly say it. Please ask Bianca. Cindy glared at Bianca, who might have been frightened by her gaze, and started saying something ridiculous. Oh, I ordered the wrong number of steaks. I told Allison to eat my portion, but she declined, saying she was fine. I'm so lucky to have such a nice woman marry into the family. Bianca was sweating profusely, and her eyes were darting around. Is that so? Cindy looked at me worriedly. Yes, that's right. Behind Cindy, I could see Bianca's face completely at ease. That face was so comical, I struggled to keep from laughing. Bianca is always so kind. She points out when I'm lacking social manners. Today, instead of steak, she prepared this for me. I said that and brought out the dog food Bianca had handed me from the kitchen. Bianca turned pale at my unexpected action.
"What's going on? What have you done to my precious wife?"
Carmine asked, but Bianca remained silent. In the quiet room, Stanley spoke up.
"Well, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? Allison is married now, so—"
Stanley started joking, and Carmine looked like he was about to grab him. Thinking it better to avoid an assault charge, I decided to call my ace in the hole. "Susan?" Everyone was surprised by my loud call. Then, from a back room, a cheerful voice replied, "Yes?" Out came Susan, grandmother-in-law. It turns out she's the Susan from pottery school. The day Bianca first called me over, we were both shocked to see each other. Never imagining that the grandmother-in-law would be Susan, we finished the housework at the parents-in-law's home together laughing. The parents-in-law's home is a two-family house, and Susan's living space was very tidy. It was obvious that she wasn't sick, but Bianca never suspected. Since Bianca returned home late at night, we went out to eat and for walks. I enjoyed the time spent with my beloved Susan, which is why I was happy to visit the parents-in-law's home. Susan had made me promise not to tell the in-laws about our relationship. I was angry at Bianca's unreasonable words, but knowing it would end someday, I could bear it. Susan didn't attend the memorial service because she didn't want to see the parents-in-law's faces. Susan always prayed for grandfather-in-law's happiness after his death.
Why, Mom, don't you have Alzheimer's?"
Stanley asked, puzzled. "That's just something this woman misunderstood on her own." With that, Bianca, who had been shrinking herself, was glared at. "I wanted to live alone with my husband, but right after getting married, you started living with us for the sake of he's your son, and you and your husband indulged in luxury with the money saved from rent." Susan said this, and Stanley looked uncomfortable. "I thought I'd be free when your transfer was decided, but then this woman said she would stay here, and it was the worst. I couldn't even talk about kicking her out because you were never home. And I pretended to be hard of hearing because I didn't want to talk to you. And then you just assumed I had Alzheimer's. It's laughable." Bianca's face turned bright red. "What I couldn't forgive the most was being treated as absent from the grandchildren's celebrations. Well, I was very happy when I found out Allison, whom I'd get along with, was the spouse of my grandchildren." Susan said that and smiled at me. Bianca, not finding this amusing, suddenly started. "I'm sorry. Allison was always so cold to me. I was frustrated, and that's why I did such a prank today. I truly regret it. But if Allison had been kinder from the start, then I wouldn't have been too—" I had no intention of playing along with such a charade. "All the precious words you've given me up until now, Bianca, I thought I'd listen to them at home, too." I said that and pulled out a voice recorder I had hidden in my pocket. With each playback, Bianca's face grew paler, and the faces around us grew more severe. Susan and I had planned to expose everything on this day when the relatives gathered, regardless of the steak incident. After listening, Cindy started to laugh. "You talk about social common sense, but you've never worked a day in your life." Apparently, Bianca had never worked and had lived a life of leisure. After the children grew up, Bianca began to go out more, causing constant arguments with Stanley. Stanley himself was apparently a habitual adulterer who returned home late every night, participating in school events for the sake of public image, but otherwise maintaining a fake relationship, as I had heard from Carmine. Carmine also hated it and left home as soon as he graduated from high school. "That's why, pack your bags and leave right now. This is the precious home of my deceased husband and me. I will never allow you to return, and you too." Susan said this and glared at Stanley. "You have another woman out there, don't you? Do as you please, trash son. I'm cutting ties with you." Stanley left the house as if fleeing, perhaps hit too close to home. "And Carmine, I know you're busy with work, but come and visit once in a while. I understand if you don't want to, given such foolish parents." Susan said this to Carmine with a slightly sad look. "Then we're heading home." As Carmine and I left the house, Bianca, looking furious, chased after me. Wait, clear up this misunderstanding. If I'm thrown out of here, I'll be in trouble. I thought if that was the case, she shouldn't have harassed me to begin with, but it's too late for her words now. I don't understand. Why don't you work? You seem to have a great understanding of how to be a respectful member of society, I said sarcastically and got into the car. She was shouting something outside, but I didn't care. She might as well regret the life she's led as she pleases. As for the former parents-in-law, after being kicked out of the parents-in-law's home, Bianca showed up at Stanley's place where he was working alone. But as Susan predicted, Stanley was already living with his mistress, and Bianca was quickly discarded. Furthermore, it turned out that Bianca had also been having an affair, and even worse, with a married man, and she was sued for damages by his wife. Since both our former parents-in-law had been unfaithful, the damages were sort of offset, but Bianca would likely continue to pay the mistress's husband. Stanley might lessen his burden if he sought damages from his mistress, but to me, they are strangers, and it doesn't matter anymore. They were a match in a way, despite the fake relationship I had heard about. Carmine has no lingering feelings for his former parents and intends never to see them again. I feel the same. As for us, we've decided to live in the parents-in-law's home where Susan lives. The house, once full of unpleasant memories, was transformed as we disposed of all the furniture Bianca had collected, and made significant changes to the interior, making it feel like a completely different home. Susan is surprisingly energetic for her age, but I'm more than willing to take care of her if she ever needs it. Furthermore, next year our family will be growing. I'm looking forward to living a happy life with my beloved family from now on.